Good evening and welcome to the first ever edition of NBO Litfest, which is presented by Book Bunk. My name is Angela Oshuka and I'm a founder at the Book Bunk Trust. And this festival is anchored in public libraries and is also a celebration of the Macmillan Memorial Library's 90th anniversary. If you're new to the work that we're doing at Book Bunk to transform public libraries in Nairobi, please visit bookbank.org and explore our grand vision for these spaces. So for now, some house rules, always fun to begin with those. Everyone is going to remain on mute apart from the speakers for the duration of the event. And this is a live session and will feature a Q&A session at the end of it. So there's a Q&A button on the right of your screen. You can share your questions there as our speakers are going through their session. We're also streaming live on Facebook. So if you're streaming online, you can also tweet us some questions. Our hashtag is NBO Litfest. And we're across social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Our handle is @thebookbank. We'd also love to hear your feedback, so we'll be sharing some polls during the session, and you can let us know how you're feeling about what we're presenting, and also what your opinions are just about the festival as a whole. And before I hand over to the moderator, Wendy Kirk, I'd like to thank the partners who are making this event possible with us, our funders, Sharjah Book Capital in Sharjah, Secret Browsing Trust in London, and the Embassy of the Netherlands in Nairobi. We're also presenting this programming in partnership with British Council, the Glasgow Women's Library, Baraza Media Lab in Nairobi, and the Sahifa Journal. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Wendy Kirk, who will be in conversation with Wanjiru Koinange. Wendy is an old-time friend of Book Bunk Trust, and she started working at the Glasgow Women's Library in 2005 as a first ever paid librarian. As well as managing a unique lending and reference collection, all built from donated materials, she runs a hugely popular read aloud group, Story Cafe, which was previously shortlisted for UK Libraries Change Lives Award. She is passionate about the life-changing power of books for all and the creativity we all bring to our own reading. Wendy is also an advocate fostering kindness in community spaces and has been part of Carnegie Trust UK's Creating Space for Kindness project, which focuses on the role of kindness in public libraries. Supported by the British Council, she has been thrilled to work with trailblazing international partners, including Book Bunk and most recently, Peace Niche in Karachi. Welcome, Wendy, or as we say in Kiswahili, karibu sana. Over to you.
Thank you. I think my internet is playing up, but I'm hoping it's going to be okay. Thanks so much for that introduction, Washuka. It is such a pleasure to be here today with you all and with best-selling author Wanjiru Koinange, who is, an all-round superwoman. So she doesn't need much introduction, but I will go for it anyway. She is a writer, restorer of libraries, and entrepreneur from Nairobi. She obtained her bachelor's degree in journalism and literature from Nairobi's United States International University, after which she worked as a talent manager for some of East Africa's most renowned artists and musicians. She then later pursued a master's in creative writing from the University of Cape Town. And she co-founded Book Bunk with Angela Washuka in 2017, which it just seems incredible that is only 4 years ago, and all the amazing work that you have packed into those 4 years, working really hard to sort of reimagine and revitalize these amazing public spaces in Nairobi. So Wanjiru's debut novel, The Havoc of Choice, which is one of the first novels to explore Kenya's 2007 post-election violence in such depth, has been described by The Standard as a breath of fresh air, which restores your hope in humanity. We were thrilled to welcome Wanjiru and Washuka to Glasgow way back in the heady days of 2019, and we had an incredible preview of The Havoc of Choice at some of our reading groups. And we've all watched from afar as Wanjiru's book has become the bestseller that it truly deserves to be. So it is such a pleasure to be here to have this conversation with you today, and a big thanks to Book Bunk for welcoming me along. I'm so looking forward to it. So I know that you're going to start us off Wanjiru with some reflections about the book. So I'm going to hand over to you for now.
Thank you, Wendy. This feels like such a nostalgia moment. I even sat next to this chair because this is where you would be if we're doing this in person. So thank you. Good evening, everybody from wherever you're joining. Thank you for choosing this session to attend. I'm going to read something just to kind of set the stage for this conversation. I want to make sure that you can hear me okay. Yes, Wendy? Yeah, fantastic. Okay, fantastic. Okay. We failed to trust that we knew ourselves to be possible from the very beginning. And that's a quote by Binyavanga Wainaina. In 2007, I voted for the very first time, and I was thrilled. It felt wonderful to show up for my country in that way. I had spent a better part of that year managing a campaign called Umoja Pamoja, which I still believe is one of the reasons why so many people came out to vote in that election. So many young people just like me then, of course, not so young now. When the violence erupted on the 29th of December, 2007, I was laying on the carpet in a friend's apartment. I was slightly hungover from the previous night. It was festive season, drink samba, everything. But I was still also beaming with pride for the things that we had accomplished, for what we'd done. So I don't think I fully understood the thing that I was seeing on my TV screens when the news broke about the post-war violence. I was so sure that those gunshots I was hearing were fireworks, that the chanting and wailing I was hearing was celebration and not shock and suffering and horror. I was convinced that everybody was just being a little extra. But the days progressed and things got worse. And then a few of us decided to go out to one of the camps that had been set up for those who had been displaced by this nightmare. That was the first time I heard the phrase internally displaced persons. I thought it was such an odd way to describe trauma. We spent a few hours at that camp on Ngong Road in Nairobi, helping where we could and trying to make sense of everything that was happening. But even then, it didn't really sink in for me. Now, when that church went up in flames in January in 2008, I knew something was broken. I just knew it. Because none of these things I was seeing felt like they were happening here at home. So people say that you see yourself more clearly when in community with others. And this is true specifically for me because it's only when I was in a new community with fellow writers so far away from home 5 whole years later that I would begin to think about '07 again. And that's when I decided to write the Havoc of Choice. Over the years I spent writing the book, I didn't dare to speak about the post-election violence here at home. Whenever I'd come home for the holidays, I'd avoid questions about what I was working on in grad school. I did not want to go there. Post-election violence felt like something that was only okay to explore when I had the safety of distance. I didn't want to pick at the scab because I knew how much work had gone into convincing ourselves that 2007 did not happen, or that even if it did, that we must just move on. So for the longest time, I was sure that all of these questions I was having about this world-changing season of our lives as Kenyans were mine and mine only. I thought I was the only one who was wondering how swiftly we'd follow these instructions to move on. But this all changed when my book came out last year. Once again, I found community. Readers who read my book and finally said, yes, Kumbe, I wasn't the only one who was thinking these things. Like, this is incredible to see someone articulate the things I've thought so well. And so this session today is dedicated to my readers, those who have read the book, I'm getting emotional, those who have read the book and built a community around it that is larger than I could ever have imagined. For those who are having the difficult conversations with their grandparents and grandchildren, because these are the conversations I truly believe will help us take one step closer to collective healing. The Havoc of Choice was not an easy book to write. It's not easy to speak about it. It's not easy to read, but nothing about 2007 was easy. Nothing about that level of loss should be easy, and nothing about healing from it will be easy. Thank you. I can't believe that book still gets me after all these years. I still get so emotional talking about it. But for those of you who might be joining us and thinking, what the hell is this woman talking about? We're gonna play you a little experiment we made with some dear friends of mine. I asked a bunch of friends who are actors and voice artists to come to the studio and help me record what would be a kind of snippet of the book. And we're very delighted to play that for you now. So over to you, Seth.
Nairobi on a Sunday is an experience best savored with all senses. It is an explosion of color as families dressed in their bright Sunday best ride in polished cars and buffed matatus, making their way out of their respective sanctuaries or to their relatives' homes. Hawkers who don't care much for the Sabbath stand at the traffic lights displaying their attractive treats: sugarcane, groundnuts, fruits, and newspapers to hungry commuters. It is the smell of fresh laundry, talcum powder, and whatever eau de toilette is on offer at Tuskie's supermarket. It is the taste of quarter chicken and chips, roasted maize, stale alcohol, and the bad decisions of last night. It is the sound of children splashing away at the public swimming pools, excited parents rowing boats at Uhuru Park, live jam sessions on lawns, parks, secret gardens, and forests, gospel music in the morning, jazz at brunch, reggae in the afternoon, and golden oldies that match the sunset. And sometimes it feels like the gods have rewarded hardworking Nairobians with a few extra stress-free hours on Sunday as a respite from city living the other 6 days of the week. Goge's car on this Sunday, however, was a silent war zone. He was swollen with irritation, and Kavata could feel it in the space between them, pushing against her as Wanja navigated through the light traffic.
This lunch must be a brief affair. I tee off at 3.
Kavata loved their home in Nyari, especially the way the house emerged almost out of thin air at the sharp turn to Red Hill Road. Their neighbors' well-manicured fences offered a lush green boulevard on each side of the tarmac as they continued up the road to their house. Greenery was rare in Nairobi until Wangari Maathai encouraged people to plant trees wherever they could. With time, the air in the cities and the suburbs became a few degrees cooler. When the family got home, Thuo opened the gate and let them in, waving as they drove past him.
I didn't know Thuo would be working today.
Neither did I. It's just as well he can drive you to the club later.
The air was light and lovely, as was the conversation. Kavata served passion juice and cold mango and watermelon slices on the balcony before announcing lunch would be served in under an hour. As she worked swiftly in the kitchen, she would occasionally glance over at Goge through the kitchen hatch. He had changed out of a stiff African shirt into a pastel yellow polo she bought him years ago when he started playing golf. He'd been hesitant about the soft color at first, but all the compliments from his fellow golfer mates changed that. Now he wore it so often she sometimes hid it away for its own sake. He looked so frustrated, she thought, and wondered if their guests could also see how much Goge longed to be elsewhere. Her resolve weakened. But she reminded herself for the 100th time that she had thought about this too long and hard to abandon ship now. She drizzled lemon juice on the kachumbari she was making, dried her hands, dabbed the corner of her left eye with a kitchen towel, and strode back out to the balcony and replenished the tray of fruit on the table next to her guests.
Okay then. Lunch will be ready in about an hour.
No, wonderful, wonderful. What are you cooking? Because me, I can smell some boozy.
Yes, I have a goat leg that has been roasting for so long. I'm sure a spoon can cut right through it. With some viazi and kachumbari.
Mighty, mighty, we give thanks. Praise the Lord.
Yes, amen. But please excuse me, I need to make a quick trip to the supermarket. We need something cold to go with the lovely lemon sponge cake Scholar baked yesterday. I'll be back just now.
Oh, I hope we are not too much trouble, Kavata. don't let us inconvenience you too much. But ice cream and lemon sponge cake does sound absolutely lovely.
Not at all. I'm happy to. I will be back in no time, and then we can eat.
I come with you.
Grace, the pastor's wife, dramatically scanned the ground around her feet for her handbag. Kavata panicked.
Please, no. Yes. If the two of you go into a supermarket, it won't be midnight before we see our meal. And there's mbuzi bwana.
Kavata smiled, turned around, and walked away before another word was spoken. As soon as she got outside,
Tuo, twende.
Thuo sprung up off his seat and folded the newspaper he was reading, following Kavata to the car.
Mommy, where are you going?
Shit. To Nakumat.
Can I come?
No, I'm coming back just now. Go, entertain the visitors.
Those are your friends, not mine.
Amani, go back inside.
Please. What are you going to buy?
No, Baba. I'm only going for some ice cream. And if you keep fussing, I will come back with Maziwamala instead. I'll be back just now.
Kavata slammed the door shut and watched him sulk as he retreated into the house.
Just like his father,
she thought. It was only when the car came to a halt at the entrance of the supermarket that Kavata realized she didn't tell Thuo of their actual destination. She decided to go into the supermarket anyway. She had a few minutes to spare and was grateful for the time alone to catch her breath and think things over one last time. She emerged a few moments later, raspberry ice cream in hand, and got back into the car.
Twende airport.
Aye, airport. Which airport, madam?
JKIA.
Thank you so much for playing that amazing dramatization, Wanjiru. Thank you. And I think now we're going to have some of the readers' responses, which are incredible. Testimonials from lots of different readers. So I was going to ask you, Wanjiru, when you wrote Havoc of Choice, were you anticipating particular responses? Have you been surprised by how people have responded to the book?
Yeah, excuse me. I definitely have. When I wrote the Havoc of Choice, I wrote it because I had questions. I didn't really think about the audience and the responses till much later when I realized, oh my gosh, this is a really big story of selling. Because at some point I was just like, it was my curiosity drawing me and how to make the things I was curious about make sense for other people. That's all I was concerned with. But then I think in the year or two before it came out, I began to be like, hang on, like Kenyans really they love their politics. Most people who are active citizens love their politics, and I'm really I've gone there with this book. I've reminded people of a really painful and divisive time, and I worried about that. I didn't worry if people would love it. I worried if they'd hate it. So what has happened in reality is the complete opposite, that people have found such resonance with it. And I think the sheer force and volume of this resonance is what's been completely shocking to me. I've had people write to me, just sobbing in the DMs, voice notes in my Instagram DM, just kind of really having real reactions and wanting to talk through what's happening for them and what this book triggered, and me kind of struggling with the fact that I'm not a qualified person to deal with those emotions and to deal with those very delicate but very valid feelings. So I think the biggest surprise has been the sheer force of the response to the book. We didn't think we'd sell out so fast. I didn't think it would. I just didn't think all these things. I didn't think I'd be putting out a book during a pandemic, so everybody was home reading, and all of those things have just made the last 16 or so months just the most, I don't even have a word, just expansive moments. I've seen myself so many times through my readers, and I never thought that would happen. They don't prepare you for that in grad school, for sure.
That's amazing, and amazing to hear that. I suppose the resonance that it's had with people has been a big surprise to you. Yeah, I was wondering as well if you've noticed a difference in the responses from people who are living in Kenya, whether that, Kenyan nationals or Kenyan nationals living abroad, or generally how the book has been received globally. So I'm very much aware that it's such a Kenyan story, but it deals with such big universal themes like power and privilege, political corruption, that like everyone can identify with aspects of the book. So have you noticed a difference between people within Kenya and people globally?
So yes and no. So the book came out in the UK first. In fact, the last time we were gathered together in the library, I think it was just at the cusp of its release. We were probably in Glasgow around the summer, and the book came out that year in November. So it came out in 2019 and in the UK first. So I already had a sense of what, a tiny sense of what UK audiences thought, but because I don't really look for reviews or audiences. So I rely on the people who do the work to tell me what the response has been. And to be honest, even thinking about outside audiences wasn't a thing I'd even imagined. When I thought about what would people in the UK, I wouldn't know why a person in the UK would pick up my book. I just was really grateful that someone that wasn't my family member had chosen to publish this book and put it out there. So I was just at the point grateful that the book was published internationally. But I was also just more intentional about the home audience, because I wrote the book for home, and I'm just like, this is where it matters. This is where it has to be marketed, where this is where I'm more precious about it, which is why we ended up publishing it ourselves in Nairobi. But that thing you mentioned about the themes being so transferable, I've had incredible experiences in India promoting my book, where people are just like, oh, you reminded me of the prime ministers and the people who lead our countries here in India. And that's happened across states in India. It happens in Glasgow as well, when we had a session at the Story Cafe in 2019, when all of these Glaswegians were just like, this is such a tangible story. And I think that's what good storytelling does. That's what good art does. It kind of bridges these gaps and makes us see all the things we have in common, and not the way that we're different. Because I just checked Amazon 2 weeks ago, and my book is sold out in the UK as well. And I'm just like, oh, okay, so obviously it's doing something right. And I could not be more grateful. But I also, every time I catch myself being like, I'm so surprised, I'm like, sure, don't do that thing. You're not surprised. You did the work. You worked hard on this. It wasn't easy. It was such an emotional roller coaster to put the Havoc of Choice out, and the response shouldn't be a surprise. It should be a note that I am indeed not crazy. That all the questions I had about the way that we heal and grieve are not just mine, that I have a community of people who really want the same for their countries and for their communities.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you're so right when you're saying responses we had when we were at the library. I think someone had said that, your book very much shines a light on everyone's politics. So yeah, it resonates absolutely in a global context. But something that I was so interested in the responses to your book was there quite a few people had said, that I think one of the comments was, if I was a millionaire, I would make sure this book was in the hands of every school child in Kenya. And this idea of, someone's saying, this book gives kids an access point to a really important part of history, whether you're Kenyan or not. This is all of us. And obviously a lot of people who are now reading the book were very, very young when the elections happened. Yeah. So yeah, I just think it's, have you had that response that this has been a really important access point for young people?
Yes, and that again, I could not anticipate. So where are we now? We're 2021, so it's been 14 years since the violence, if my math is incorrect. So it's like I have 7 nieces and nephews and 1 godchild that I love with all of my heart, and the oldest one of them is 25 years old. So she was a baby when this was happening. And that's the thing that I never anticipated. I was really writing for my peers. When I was writing, I'm just like, let me write for people like who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, who remember 07, right? But then my niece read this book and told me, oh my goodness, I remember the thing from the news. I remember not being able to go out, but I just thought it was just like a holiday. I thought it was just like the Christmas season, because also this coincided with the Christmas season. We voted in December. So that has been the most, I think, the point at which the book has been the most rewarding, that it can be used as an access point for this much younger Kenyans, and 50% of Kenya's population is under the age of, is it 19 or 21? We're young, so most of these people just were in their formative years when these things were happening, and which is why it's integral that it gets into the hands of these people, and this is who it has now become kind of my mission to get the book to them, because it's a part of our history, and we are very intentionally and socially, and we're socialized to forget, to just to not talk about the painful things, to cover. So there's never a carpet that's not, just find a new carpet and sweep things under it. And we do it so well as Kenyans. We're such experts at PR and such experts at just making everyone think that we're okay, even if we're all in trauma post, every time election comes around the corner. I just want to make sure my passport is valid just in case I can grab my loved ones and leave. So to the reviewers who've just been this book should be on the curriculum, it should, and not just my book. There's so many Kenyan authors out there who are just writing the times we're living in, and who are trying to give us different lenses through which to see each other, and those books need to be what our children read. And it's also why this festival is happening, because libraries will also become the places where these books are accessible to these people. When the curriculum fails, then we'll have libraries, and we'll put the books people need to read in those libraries.
I love that sentiment. Yeah, the books that people need to read being in the library. I mean, yeah, as an author and a restorer of libraries, it just must be incredible to know that your book is going to be in libraries for people to read.
Oh, it's the best feeling. Let me tell you, it's the best. Because it doesn't have to be you know what, and it's true, right? Libraries wouldn't get you selling millions, right? But the number of books that hand will touch once you put in a public library, in a country like Kenya where books are so expensive, that changes completely. It changes everything. Just put 10 books in your library and see fame. Fame will just arrive at your doorstep.
We have certainly been delighted, to have your book in our library, and for it to had been borrowed and been recommended and popping up at our monthly book picnic, which we have been recommended by staff and volunteers. So yeah, so it's amazing. It's amazing to have it on our shelves too. I was interested, thinking, I know that you said that you wrote this book because you had questions and you wanted to sort of work through those. Did it ever occur, did you ever think this is a massive challenge to write something that is about a national event of this significance, particularly that it was your debut novel as well? I mean, did you ever feel daunted, or were you just so set on this is something that you needed to write?
Yeah, that imposter syndrome. I mean, writing any book, first, second, third, is hard. Writing any genre book, be it a political history or nonfiction or memoir, is difficult. So there's many moments when I was just this story is too big for me. It's not mine. I'm not political. It's not my struggle. I'm just gonna I want to submit my thesis and graduate from master's, and then just put this thing in a drawer somewhere and forget about it, because I was afraid of the response. I was afraid, and also maybe just a little arrogant and a little afraid, because I also assumed my book would come out and just whoa, everybody would read it. And for a minute there, when you finished your master's, you're just oh, I'm so invincible. Everyone wants a piece of what I've got. But there was moments when I knew the impact of the book. I knew that it would have a conversation. I just didn't know if I was ready for my name to be attached to that book. And the name of not just a young person, a young woman in Kenya, a young woman who's Kikuyu, who is the tribe that has been in leadership for the longest time in Kenya. So there's so many things that were working against the creation of this book, but all of those things were just in my mind. And the thing that I do when I'm unsure is that I bury myself in fact. I could not be more grateful that I chose to go to journalism school when I did, because that just makes me so comfortable around data and facts, and knowing that the thing that I'm talking about is true, and no one can question that. And when we speak truth in a way that no one can refute, and truth honestly is that if you do it well, and if you do it in a way that isn't laced in bias and isn't laced in your opinion, then people will receive it better. And those many biases, don't get me wrong. I probably made some mistakes in this book, but there's there's many biases that I had. There's many ways in which my privilege took center stage, in which the fact that I'm a woman took center stage, the fact that I'm a certain tribe took center stage. But it's only through writing this book and going through the work and having editors point these things out that I began to see myself and see the problem that I was as well in this whole thing I'm trying to fix, because I don't think that anyone's perfect. I definitely am not perfect. Even having spent so much time reading about the election violence, I don't think I always make the right choices, but I'm a little more aware of what my hang-ups and my blind spots are because this book exists. And that for me is just, I'm always grateful and surprised by that.
Thank you, Wanjiru. That's so fascinating. And thinking about you with all your journalistic skills. Going through obviously a lot of research for the book, and and I know that you've talked about this about truth, and I was interested in, the title of the book, because I found that when I read the book, I found that I was very intrigued by the title, and then once I read it, I was like, it is perfect for the book, because for those people who haven't read it, it really is people's choices, and the consequences of people's choices and the impact that people's choices can have on other people, and often in devastating ways. So there's so many ways that choice it basically is behind everything that happens in the book. I would love to hear a wee bit more about how you came up with the title and how you settled on it.
The title was a community effort. It was the day before the day I was due to hand in my thesis, and I couldn't find. I didn't have a name. It was still called Untitled on the manuscript, and I think I had a potential name of. It was potentially called Sunday Lunch, because the book begins on a Sunday at lunch, as you just heard, and ends on Sunday, with a different kind of lunch. And when I lived in Cape Town, the thing that I missed the most was Sundays and being with my family on Sundays. So I'm just like, it's in there somewhere. So, but it didn't really hold. By the time I was done, I'm like, it doesn't hold. So I just wanted to submit an untitled thing. And my dear friend Christine Jacobson, who's now passed and resting in peace, she just had me come over to her house, and she was like, come, I've got gin and poetry, and we're gonna find a title for your book. And I went over to her house, and we just kind of like read poetry and by her swimming pool and drank gin. And then she read out a line from a book that I can't remember the name of the poem, and I'm gonna have to go back to Hout Bay and find this book and find the poem, because I remember the page number even. But it was about a man who was kind of looking at he was standing on a hill looking at his land or his country after the country had been through this horrible war. And he was kind of lamenting about the havoc and the spoil. And I liked the word the havoc and the spoil, but I liked the word havoc, but I didn't really like spoil, because I don't think that it resonated. But I also knew that I wanted the word choice in there. And so I took these fragments to my supervisor, and I'm just like, I don't have a name for this thing, but I know I want the word choice and and like between Imran and Christine and myself, we came up with a name. And I think it sits perfectly, because this is a book about an election, fine, but I think it's really truthfully a book about choices and family and the way that one choice affects the other and the other person, and who we think about when we make our choices. And even now in the last year, I've just been thinking about that. I'm just like, how considerate am I when I'm making choices? I keep telling people to think about these things, and I've told people in my book, but am I really the one doing the same things? So it's really a book about choice, and I think the title really, in the end, captured that, and did so quite well, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, it's perfect. And I'm sorry, I think my internet froze, so I missed a tiny bit there, but of what you were saying at the beginning. But I think throughout the book as well, I was just, I think when I was rereading it for the second time, just spotting so many incredible quotes and examples of choice and the impact that all your characters have on the lives of each other, which it's just incredible. I was going to ask you actually about your characters in the book, because I think they're so beautifully drawn, and I just felt absolutely swept away by them. And how did your characters come to you? How did their voices and their personalities and their histories? Could you beautifully, introduce us to characters in different chapters? with their, with a bit of their history. Yeah, could you tell us a wee bit about that? And I've got some other
Sure.
questions about your characters as well.
Sure. That's my favorite bit. I love, love, love my characters. And I promise you that in my head, they're all real people. You can't tell me Kabata isn't real. You can't tell me Googie isn't real. They're real. And I think it's like that way for most writers. A lot of them are older than the others. So Googie was probably one of the first characters I ever wrote, Chepto as well, and Suo. So those three I've been writing since I was about 19 or 20. And I think they're all inspired by different men in my life. And that's the thing, everybody in my book is inspired by people who I've interacted with, people who I've just sat in a cafe watching. I'm always interested in like the people who keep our worlds running. When we have these big productions, I was just watching the opening of the Dubai Expo 2020, and I was wondering about like whose job is it to drive the production crew home when they're done with the work. Like I want to tell that guy's story and how he has to sit in the parking lot for hours and hours waiting. Does he go home? Does he sleep? So I'm really interested in the people in the fringes who no one focuses on. And I think that those people, including Googie, kind of are the people who interested me the most. But I guess the way that they all end up in the same book is that I wanted to tell a big story about Kenya, and Kenya is big, and Kenyans live everywhere, including in the US. And the only way that I could take the readers to different parts of the country is if I created this unit where you could have people of different tribes living, and different tribes and different socioeconomic standing live in the same house, and that's most Kenyan homes. So telling the story of a family, and a family in the way that I saw them, in the way that I grew up with them, in the way that my friends and my peers grew up with them, that gave me the lens to really talk about Kenya. So if you have somebody who's coming from Western Kenya, then you can talk about what's happening in Western Kenya. If someone's coming from the coast, you can talk about that. So the decision to put them in the book is because I wanted someone that the reader could latch onto and travel across the country with. And that's why it was important that for me that they were so diverse. And obviously they could have been more diverse, but they all kind of brought this magic to the space that I think could not have been a result of them being more similar than they were different. Yeah, and I truly love them. I think the conversations that I've enjoyed the most are about my characters. It's so interesting to hear people's reactions to them. And people keep asking me if they're based on real people, and none of them really are, but all of the answer is yes and no. They're all based on people who I know and love. If you ask my siblings, they'll all think that Thuo used to be a driver my father had years ago. And I was like, actually, it's not this other guy. It's a driver that we had, but it's one or the other. And I think that's a really special thing, that people can see themselves so clearly and see their lives so clearly through this art.
Well, it just must feel amazing as an author when your characters are literally like leapt out of the book into people's hearts, into people's minds, and they do feel real, and people really connect with them. It must feel amazing. And yeah, I think you did an incredible job. Basically having so many different perspectives, people from, like you were saying, from different classes, socioeconomic backgrounds, different gender, people, within Kenya, and then with, in the States, it was incredible to be able to get all those different viewpoints. So yeah, amazing. I'm aware that we've got a couple of questions in the chat box. Would you like to answer some questions as we go? Let me have a wee look.
Let's have a look.
Okay. So, Marion is asking, what was the research process like for you, especially around the politics and the whole post-election violence in general? So yeah, I know that you did do quite a lot of research. If you want to tell us a little bit about that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Marion. So 2012, I started this book. 2014, I finished the first draft. Of those 2 years, I'd confidently say at least 8 months were spent researching. And researching something that I had experienced real time, because I lived in Kenya during the violence. I had watched the news, I'd read the papers, I'd read all of the work that had come out because of the violence. Kwani, which is a big inspiration for this festival, published an entire edition dedicated to the violence. So I'd done the work of researching, and that's why, again, my background as a journalist really came through for me, because I didn't want to there's nothing that I didn't want to leave any question kind of unanswered, because I just wanted to do a really good job, but also the research also made me ensure that I was gonna be interested in this thing long enough to write a book about it. And that's one thing I keep saying to people who are writing it, like, you need to be 100% sure of your topic before you start to write, because this thing is gonna be a long thing, and 4 years down the line, you still must be interested in this thing. And the research, when I was done with it, because I still had questions about if I was gonna write this book in those 8 months of reading about the violence, but I still thought that I could sustain my curiosity and have the characters do the work that the research couldn't. So it was about 8 years of research then, and then I did 8 drafts of the book. So the book took 8 years between it starting and it hitting the shelves. And every year I have 8 drafts of the book in my drive. And all of those drafts are because I've discovered something new about the situation I was writing about myself, about my privilege, about the readers. I just kept discovering new things or getting feedback from editors who I absolutely trusted. And I mean, I don't think, in fact, just now in the session we had before this one, Lauren just said that people who are journalists and writers, we're so comfortable in facts that sometimes we forget to use our imagination. And right now I'm trying to write a book that's quite imaginative, and I'm just like, oh, I don't know, I think I need to research. I need to read more about like this thing. Who can I read? And I think that at some point, true mastery is being able to understand what stories could be fueled by research and what stories can be fueled by imagination, but also playing with what actually is imagination. Can you just take some data and then make it bigger and better by using your creative imagination? And I also think that the research is ongoing, because the thing I wrote about is not resolved. There's been no happy bow at the end of the story, and I don't think there's gonna be one for a really long time.
What an absolutely brilliant answer, and such good advice, as you were saying, for people starting out writing, making sure that you're interested in something for a long time. And just how you've ended that response actually just follows straight on to another question from CO Cow, who says, because the book covers an ongoing situation in Kenya, would you ever do a sequel to it?
Today, the answer is no. I don't know if I have another Havoc of Choice in me. I really, my biggest regret about this book is that it didn't have a better ending, that people didn't walk away from the book feeling hopeful. And I'm not saying all books must be happy and leave you feeling hopeful and joyful and positive, because that's not the way that life works, right? But I know that the book resonates, and I really think that there's painful stories that are important, but there's also joyful stories that are important. So to answer that question, maybe if we got some justice around what happened in 2007, maybe then I'd want to come back and be like, okay, so it took us a while, but we're here, and this is what happened, and this is how people have been able to heal, and this is what art has done for this process, because I'm such a believer in art as a catalyst for social change. So yes and no, knowing that I don't want to do it now because I don't think that I have it in me at the moment, because I'm still very jaded about the state of things in our country, and I love Kenya so much. So I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't love this country. But it also pisses me the hell off, and I'm just like, I need to be, maybe I need to go away, because writing this book also was a result of me having some perspective. But in the meantime, I do want to celebrate the things that we do well, like love and care for each other and find each other and all of those. I want to celebrate humanity a little more, and then maybe I'll come back and talk about the serious stuff again.
Thank you. What an amazing answer. I think we've got another question in the chat from Gabrielle, who says, thank you so much for everything you've shared already. I love the book and it stayed with me. I wonder if there are audience who you hope will read your book, or people who you would wish would read the book. Maybe people who've not yet read.
I wish this book would be translated into as many Kenyan languages as possible, so we could read it to our grandmothers and our grandfathers, because I think that when we think about our history and our past, we also forget that our ancestors were dealing with like colonization for the first time, and like all of these things were so new and so like and some decisions were good and some of them were bad, and I think that we really put the burden of perfection on those who came before us. And the things that we are going to get wrong in our generation, the things that are happening that are not supposed to be right now, but I think there's just the thing that storytelling does. I think the most touching responses I've gotten to this book are people who are in my mother's peers, who are just like, hey, Shiro, you really did one with this thing. You really made me think about everything. Because if you can shift thought at that level, if you can convince a 70-year-old woman to rethink how she approaches tribe, which is still a problem in this country. I'm sure most people on this call would admit to the fact that if they brought a lover home from another tribe, their parents would be like, what's his mother? He's from what part of the country? No. You have to come and keep it here in the family, or keep it in the province, for lack of a better word. But if you can shift, and that's obviously an effect of like a lot of years of active segregation that was done to try and tap the thing that that drew us together, which was this wonderful land. So I think that I don't doubt that the book will be read by my peers, because they have been reading it and they have been sharing it with each other. But I really think that the brave step would be to be like, okay, mom, let's talk about this thing. Let's talk about why you only hire people from a certain race. Let's talk, or tribe rather. Let's talk about how when you talk about a certain tribe, you completely think about how, these people are really bad workers. These ones are better workers. These ones are thieves. Like those things. Like show me the data. Tell me so. Like let's talk about it like from a point of trying to ask where these things came from in the first place. And maybe they're true, but let's just know whose truth it is, because not all of it is ours.
Amazing answers. And amazing that you actually mentioned language there, because that was something I wanted to ask you about as well. Well, obviously I know that I've heard you speak about like how many incredible languages are spoken in Kenya. And language was something that, you were so keen to have, like the sights and sounds of Nairobi really captured in the book. And I loved the fact that people really picked up on that in the responses. So I'm just going to try and find the response, because I thought it was absolutely brilliant what someone said. Hang on a wee sec. Someone said, the more you read it, you identify so much with the characters and situations, and you're like, wow, someone wrote a book for me. The Havoc of Choice is a Kenyan book written by a Kenyan for Kenyans. So obviously this is really shone through in the responses, but can you tell us a wee bit about how you worked really hard to kind of capture that in the book? I'd love to hear a wee bit more about that if we've got time, and we've got a few more questions too.
Fair. I love that question, and I love that response. Somebody wrote a book for me, and I've read books that have made me feel that. I'm actually reading one now that I will show you, but it's properly my laptop up. And that's such a good feeling when you watch something, when you read something, when you listen to a song, and you're like, did this person like hack my WhatsApp messages and send me or write the song for me? I didn't get the language right at the first try. So there's two things I struggled with the most, and that was one of them, the voice, and kind of like deciding what the tone of this book's voice would be, and my voice would be. And then because I wrote this book when I was sitting in Upper Campus in Cape Town, looking at the beautiful Table Mountain, living in a really nice apartment, grieving the loss of my father, there were so many things I had lost connection to. And one of them was home, because I was just, at that point, home is not somewhere I wanted to be. My dad had just died. I didn't want to be in Nairobi anymore. My sister, who's like my favorite person in the entire world, had gone to grad school in the UK. So I'm just like, what is Nairobi? I need to get out of here. So I kind of not only left Nairobi physically, but I also kind of left it intellectually and with my heart. So when I wrote The Havoc of Choice in the first draft, the Kenyans didn't sound like Kenyans, sound like South Africans, sound like Capetonians specifically, which was a very specific sound. And that's the first piece of feedback that I got when I opened up my book and asked somebody to read it. He was just like, this book sounds like you wrote it at a master's degree program in the middle of Upper Campus in UCT. So the way that you're gonna remember how people sound is by living in Kenya. So like, and he quite blatantly told me, I'm not gonna publish it now until you work on those things. And I was quite upset. But like when I came back home and I was doing the work and had kind of like settled back into Nairobi after being away for about 4 years, I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. No one speaks like this. People don't say these things. And so I had to really like do an entire edit of the book where all I looked at is a dialogue, and I also just began, I'd sit for hours in cafes and just listen to guys' conversations, pretending to be on my headphones, but they're really not plugged into anything, and just listen, eavesdrop on people's conversations, so I could remember what home sounded like. And the result is the dialogue. The result is the way that the language and just people just kind of dance in and out of language. That's how we speak. We dance, we play around, like we probably speak 17 different languages at a single time, but we don't know because language evolves in the city. And it also doesn't mean that because you speak more fluent Swahili than English that you're any less intelligent. It just means that you're, if anything, more intelligent, that you have more ways to express yourselves. And I really wanted to celebrate language because we really play with it. We dance with so many Englishes here in Kenya. And as a result of having over 40 tribes kind of on a really, really small piece of land, which is Kenya, because Kenya is actually tiny compared to most other countries.
Love that answer.
Mosquitoes,
thinking,
man.
what does home sound like? Really, yeah, amazing. I'm just going to check the chat box, the Q&A, because there's a few more questions. So Jill is asking, what kept you inspired on days it was hard to write? Which is a good question.
It's a really good question. My sister Belinda, who I think was the only person that I wanted to share the book with early, because I wanted her to design the cover, and she designed the East African edition cover. And there's a no nonsense way Belinda will talk to you sometimes and just be like, what, so you don't publish this book? And then all those years were like wasted, and you've been talking about this book for so many. So she really just like, she kept me going in that sense. And I think it's really important to have that person that will just see through your shit and tell you you're in your head, now get out or go for a walk and come back. So my sister Belinda was a really big person there. I think I'm generally a very motivated person, and I've learned this recently. I really like to finish things. If I don't finish something, it will really niggle at me. And I don't even want to be the one to finish them, but I want to see things that I begin end. And if they don't end, I want to know that I'm ending that chapter so I really like to close things, and it never was a question for me about finishing the book. The book was always going to be finished. I think it was a question of how it gets released. And for the longest time, I thought this would be a stage play, by the way. I don't think I've ever said this, but I thought the Havoc of Choice would be something that we put on stage. I didn't really see, I didn't see it as a book for a really long time. But I also take breaks when I have to. I don't start writing until I've tested my concept, and until I know that I will be completely obsessed with something, because then if you're sure that you'll be obsessed with it, then it's easier to get through the hurdles, because you've got to be interested in it. I also read short bits of text. So when I'm struggling with something and I can't get a way around it, I'll either leave it alone and start on something else, or I'll read something or watch something. But for the most part, it's that I'm really interested in the things that I write about and the things that I do generally. So I have to be sure that I will give it at least 4 years before I start.
Brilliant. Such good advice as well for people who are amongst us who are writers. I'm going to see if there's one more question in the chat. And then
I'm just laughing at Caroline saying majestically catching mosquitoes as we speak. Man, the mosquitoes in Nairobi are crazy. And I'm just like, what's happening? It's that season, the mosquitoes are like that.
Brilliant. Totally multitasking, big style. So Adele is saying, I hugely respect and admire the courage required to write the Havoc of Choice. Have you found the process to be an empowering one for you and other Kenyan writers? Thanks, Adele, for your question.
That's a really good question. I had somebody write to me, or if I can report somewhere on the platforms, give a piece of feedback that says that because I had written Kavata in the way that I have, she's gotten the courage to write characters, her characters in the way that she imagines them. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, because we're so unkind to women, even as women. We're really unkind to ourselves, and the amount of like depth we allow ourselves. Right. And I felt that in a real way when I was writing Kavata, because I knew that people would struggle with her, because I struggled with her as well. But I also wanted her to be somebody who you can dislike, but you can't fault. Right. And one of the most interesting, but also the most painful responses I've gotten to the work is people who are very angry at Kavata. And that breaks my heart, because I'm like, Kavata was a man who wouldn't feel this way, and we know it, right? So I think that there's so many things that it's doing and asking us to think about the kind of grace we give different people. And it's been inspiring for me to do it and to find such community in the characters, and to find that people are just like, okay, because you've done this, now I can write about this thing that I think was really, really difficult, and I know that it's going to be hard, but it's been done. It's the same way that I felt when I read works by other African authors that just made me feel so jealous to be like of them. When I read Sefiata, I'm just like, oh, how does she write like that? I've talked about Chimamanda many times, and just how like when you read her work, you're in Nigeria, you're there with her in the US, and several other writers. And I think that's what inspires me, and that's what I'm hoping and grateful to have done, be able to do for others who are reading and writing.
Yeah, you have done that incredibly. And there's some lovely comments. That says fantastic to have this feedback, fueling the great writing tradition in Kenya. Absolutely. I know that we've not got long to go. I was going to maybe ask one very, very quick question before we say our thanks at the end. Where do you, apart from obviously amazing book festivals like this, for example, but where do you look to, where you're providing creative inspiration and connection across the globe for people? Where do you look for that for yourself in terms of your own sort of inspiration and connection?
Oh, that's a good one. It varies. I have seasons where I'm obsessed with like documentaries, which is I think where I'm at now. And I'm gonna get dragged on Twitter for this, but reality TV really, really, because again, I'm trained as a journalist, and like you don't need to make many things up because human beings are so vast in the things that they do. So I really like watching people's lives. So I'll often have just like something playing in the background, and that inspires me more than I care to admit, to be honest, because people's lives are just hilarious sometimes. I fiercely and violently defend and look up to anybody who's brave enough to put art out, especially in economies where there's no funding for art, there's no encouragement for art, there's no space for it, and there's no regard for its importance, because then you're fighting against so many levels to get your creativity out. It's already so hard to create, and then you have to now justify your creation. So anytime I come across something that's Kenyan, that's African, that's new, and that's exciting, and that's brave, I want to do more for the space. I want to do more as an artist. Right now, I've been the musicians who are on the festival. I've been listening to them consistently this month, because I'm just like, this is such great music coming out of Kenya, and I've kind of danced around the creative scene so many times that I think it's all so special. But anyone who's kind of making it work for themselves and calling themselves a creative, whether it's full-time or part-time, I don't even care, just do it. That's what drives me to add, because then together we have this incredible creative and magical voice, and we can begin to see the kind of cities that we want for ourselves and for our people, all that good stuff.
Amazing. And you're capturing all this at this incredible festival, and all the work you're doing with Book Bunk. It's absolutely amazing. And this hour has flown by, so I'm going to say some thank yous just before we end. I'd like to thank the people that made this event possible: the Sharjah World Book Capital, Sigrid Rising Trust, the Embassy of the Netherlands in Nairobi, and the British Council. And we've so enjoyed supporting programming with you. Thanks to all the wonderful colleagues at Book Bunk who have worked so hard for months to deliver this incredible festival. And thank you, Wanjiru, for sharing your writing journey with us. We don't take it for granted. And
thank you, Wendy, for having this conversation with me.
It's so lovely, so fantastic, and such a lovely way to end my Friday. And a thanks to everybody for logging on and all your questions and your beautiful comments in the chat. So we just hope that you enjoy the rest of the festival and have a lovely weekend, and enjoy reading Wanjiru's book. So thank you so much to everyone for coming. Yes, thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you, Wendy. You were wonderful. I so happy to see your face, and
I know. We hope to see you in person soon. Lots of love, everyone. Okay, bye.